to me, that is the best news any of us could get. Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum. So when we decided on who the women would be that we would present today, we knew that some would have a plethora of information, like Sister Charlotte, and others of us would have to sort of improvise, right? We would have to take a combination of different sources to try to get as much information as we could on the pioneer that we would be presenting on. So Sumaya bint Khayat was the first Shaheed in al-Islam. She was killed after being the seventh person to take Shahada. But she wasn't killed after she took Shahada. I'll give you just some background information on her, just some quick facts. She was born in 550, died in 615. She was Ethiopian, and she was the seventh Shahada. As I was doing my research on her, of course, there was very little on her, and a lot of the sources were duplicated. So I decided to focus on why we still know her story, why, after all of these years, her story is important to the development of this community. And the first thing that came to my mind is that only Allah knows how and when we will die. So when she embraced Islam as the seventh person, she did not know that she would be the first Shaheed. She did not know that she would be the first person to die for the sake of Islam, but Allah knew. And she was a woman who was enslaved. She was of lower status. She was the mother of one son, and she was a wife. So her being the first Shahada, the first Muslim to die for Islam, she represents represents the idea that when you have something that you believe in and you make a declaration and you say that you're willing to give your life for it, you're not certain of how your life will end. You just have to have assurance and faith that Allah is going to protect you, that Allah is going to provide what you need for as long as you're here on earth. So some of her characteristics, traits that she had, was that she was intelligent. It was reported that even as a young child, when in school, she was always identified as the student to go to who had the best insight, the best understanding of what was being presented to the students. And it was through that intelligence and that logic she used to embrace Islam. So Islam being a logical religion, it follows the natural path, the order of how we were created. Her being an intelligent and very inquisitive and logical woman, Islam made sense. And it was just natural for her to embrace Islam. She embraced Islam as an older woman. She was already a wife, she was already a mother, and she had lived her life, but as I said, she was very intelligent. She was respectable. She was always known for having etiquette, manners, knowing how to have tact when interacting with others, and she was held in high regard by all people, young and old. She was very sensitive. She was in tune with her feminine nature, and she was in tune with her human nature, and she was always sensitive to others. Text that I had pulled from her talked about her willingness, and it says of her life, her faith was tested. So when she embraced Islam, it wasn't easy. It was the beginning of the call of Prophet Muhammad to Islam, and she kept her faith. She had bravery in dealing with the difficulties, and she saw a huge struggles, sometimes it's easier to say, I give up. It's not worth the struggle. It's not worth the fight. And we have to remember why we're doing what we're doing. And so she's an inspiration in that she had bravery and faith in spite of the obstacles. Being of lower status, lower financial status, she would get the brunt of the abuse. And not just her, but all people who embrace that were slaves. It was easier to abuse someone who you felt you could not gain anything from. They wouldn't be protected in any way because they had no money and they no one cared for them. But she had nothing to lose. Her knowledge, her faith were strong enough that she didn't care that she would be getting the brunt of the abuse. She knew what she believed in was the truth, and she was willing to take that for the love of Islam. She was perseverant, she was patient, steadfast, firm, and very strong. She knew that life was a test and that there would be difficulties, but she also knew that it was short. And upon returning to Allah, she would be granted eternal hereafter in Jannah, and the reward would be with Allah. And then she would, of course, be reunited with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So her husband was Yasir. I realized I didn't even mention his name. And her husband Yasir and her son Ammar also embraced Islam prior to her embracing Islam. And there were several incidents of them being tortured, being forced to stand in the sun for long periods of time, being dressed in male coats, and while Prophet Muhammad witnessed the oppression that they were receiving, he passed by, and he is said in several sources to have quoted to them, "Patience, O family of Yasir, your meeting place will be in paradise." So once again, in spite of her being described as a very old or frail woman, she was steadfast. She refused to abandon Islam, and her death was a very violent death, and she was stabbed by Abu Jahl, a member of the Makhzum clan. Also a member of the Makhzum clan. She returned home after having a day of abuse, so being forced and persecuted, being forced into pain and persecution. She returned home. He was standing there. He began to insult her verbally, and he then stabbed her and impaled her with a spear. Later, after battle, Abu Jahl was killed at the Battle of Badr. Muhammad told her son Ammar, Allah has killed your mother's killer. And so for me, like I said, the story of her life is very brief, but it is a representation of having faith, having firmness, and even in spite of difficulties, feeling as though you may not be always or respected or understood, to stand firm in what you believe, and that Allah determines your final rest. Allah determines how you'll die, when you'll die, and under the conditions. But most importantly, it's how you live your life and being firm in establishing that which you believe in. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Today I'm going to be doing Sister Nusayba bint Ka'b Amara. She was referred to as the Iron Woman. Sister Nusayba, I'm not sure if anyone knows who Nusayba is. Anybody knows who Nusayba is? Nusayba is the sister that you hear about. Well, let me just give you some back history. We'll get all into that. She is from the clan of Bani Najjar, and she's an Ansari. So she's from Yathrib, Medina. She was from a Jewish clan. So she was one of the early converts to Islam. She had 2 children, each of whom was martyred, as well as their father. And she was also married again with 2 more children. I'll explain a little bit more once I get into the details of her life. Okay, Nusayba bint Ka'b. So this sister, she is, I don't know if you know what the second pledge of Bayat al-Aqaba is, which is the oath of Aqaba. The oath of allegiance. There were over 500 people who they were going to Mecca to make not Hajj, but make the rites that they performed during that time. She was among the group that was going to fulfill their rights to Allah. So at that time, it was 73 men and 2 women who went and took the pledge of oath of allegiance to Allah. So basically what happened was, during that time, the Prophet was being persecuted. He was being, by his family members as well as, his extended family. And so his uncle was the only one who was giving him that protection. So this oath was basically like a handoff, if you will. So because they made the oath to say not only that they submit to Allah and that they will follow what Allah says and Prophet Muhammad being the messenger, but also that they will protect him as they will protect their own children. So this was the covenant they made before the Prophet actually made his way to Medina. So this was like the So, and she was among 2 women that did this. Now, things that were interesting to me about this is that the 73 people and the 2 women, this wasn't something that was granted by the leader of the group from Yathrib. In fact, they didn't know anything about it. These were people who were among the Jews who believed, they knew that in the Torah it spoke about how Allah would have a prophet come from the Meccans and everything like that. So they believed, and so they came and they made this commitment to protect Prophet Muhammad in Yathrib because he was no longer safe in Mecca. And she was one of the people who did that, one of only 2 women who did that as well. After making the oath of allegiance, she came back to Yathrib and she started an education institute for women. She devoted herself to the education and the training of women in accordance with the teachings of Al-Islam. So for me, it was like, okay, so she made this oath of allegiance, and then of Medina, because this is what Allah causes us to do. Now, what she is most known for is the Battle of Uhud. So in the Battle of Uhud, this is the battle in which the archers, they left their stations, and then they were eventually killed. So then the Prophet is in the situation where he's being attacked. And things that I learned doing my research was that not only was the Prophet being attacked and, the archers got knocked down and everything like that, but people were literally running off from the war. Like, these men were running for their lives. That was something that was interesting that I didn't really understand, but they were running from their lives. So Nusayba, she came as like a nurse to give water, bandage up the, people who are bleeding and things of that nature. And so at some point she saw that the war was turning, and she saw that the Prophet was over there, and the only people that were over her were her sons, like about 10 people at the time. So she made her way over there. Her son, he was bleeding profusely. She bandaged him up and she pled with him. She said, find the strength to fight, to protect protect Prophet Muhammad. She was begging him. She grabbed her sword and she received a shield from a person who was running from the war, running from the aggressors, the polytheists. And the Prophet actually said to them, he's like, if you won't fight, give your things to those who will. So that's how she got her shield. And so the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's many recounts of how he said everywhere he looked, he saw her. She was defending him on his left, on his right. She was everywhere she was. So, I don't know. Have any of y'all seen Game of Thrones? Okay, so y'all remember there's this part in Game of Thrones, right, where what's his name? Jon Snow. He's